They've been doing forever in New York City has been serving pork, mid-rare to medium, and that's something now we could actually now legally sell, not just on the side and say, hey, you'll enjoy this a lot better. But so instead of using the regular oil, you don't want to use. The best thing to do is use like a can spray, because it'll go evenly onto the meat as well, and not have too much drippage, which causes the flare-ups. Yeah. Sure, this grill is, I think, roughly 600, 700 degrees. So basically, I can now sear the meat. And the neat thing about it is that you can actually set the grill to different. They actually have a bar in the center that keeps all the heat on one side, so that way I can basically mark on one side, and then basically finish the cook time on the other side with indirect heat. And then earlier I demonstrated how to do like the smoke, and I actually have a piece of lemongrass in the bottom to basically permeate some lemon flavor as well. Lemongrass, I'll actually pass it around in a second. So I'm putting this fat down first, just so it basically renders off the meat itself, and also with the fat on, it basically acts as a natural non-stick. It creates a non-stick surface on the grill itself. So by using a spray, we're preventing any flare-ups from happening. And then I seasoned one side, and now basically going to season on the other side with sea salt. And basically I can now almost, since it's indirect heat and at low temperature, I could actually close the lid and let it sit there for a few minutes while I talk about the next part of our demo. Meat cooks after it's off the grill or off. So if I wanted to get a mid-rare, I would basically pull the meat off at 125 and let it gently go up to 135 on its own, rather than leave it up to 135, because what you're going to do is if you stop at 135, you're actually going to end up with a medium steak, because if you let it rest and basically it'll continue cooking, it's going to reach an internal temperature of 145 eventually. So there's a 10-degree difference actually when you take it off the grill itself. So when you do grill it, you also want to make sure that when you do temp any sort of meat off of a grill, to actually take it on a tong and remove it off of the grill, because the indirect heat from the bottom will actually throw off your thermometer reading. And not to actually stick it at the center of the loin, but actually to take the loin sideways and stick it through the side. That way you get the actual internal center. And then the most thermometers work better when at least half an inch to 1 inch of the bottom part of the thermometer is actually in the meat itself. If you have it, if it's a small steak and you have it partially in, it's going to throw off the reading, because it's reading also the temperature outside as well. So that's why it's important to stick it sideways into the meat rather than on top. So in the recipe book, I have recipe guide, I have the salad, slaw, an Asian slaw that will be going with the pork tenderloin. And you think about slaw in most restaurants, and it's always mayonnaise based. And the mayonnaise base that they have usually has a lot of sugar as well. Well, I'm going to show you a couple of different vegetables that you could add that that have natural sweetness in itself, and it's also very good for diabetics that are trying to keep their glycemic counts and all their insulin index low. The first vegetable we have here is a jicama. Jicama is originally from Mexico, actually, and was introduced into it was introduced via the conquistadors to the Philippines initially, and then from the Philippines it spread out to Indonesia and to the other southeastern, like Sri Lanka and all those other islands as well. So jicama is essentially a root vegetable. I'm going to cut one in half and pass it around so I can basically demo it. It's essentially a cross between a pear and a potato. Yeah, if you want to pass it around. Jicama, oh, a good question. All the produce that I have today, I actually purchased at like the Asian markets. Most Asian markets will have it, but also Price Chopper, the Golbs have been really wonderful at now stocking their international sections, and Hannaford as well, being more aware of alternative foods as well. So basically almost all the supermarkets will have most of the items I have in here as well. So the jicama is a great source of dietary fiber. Natural, it has, people complain that it's not, well, it's not really supposed to be sweet, but it can be eaten raw as well. In parts of Mexico, they actually stew this and make stew this, or they actually eat it as a salsa. You could actually dice it up and eat it raw as a salsa, mix it with tomatoes, cilantro. It makes a very nice alternative than for other vegetables as well. So, in terms of peeling, the skin isn't really too edible. What I do is rather than go through with a standard peeler, basically just take the ends off. So you have cut it in half and take the ends off. Then you can then further cut it into quarters, and then go sideways and follow. If you have a thinner knife, you could actually reduce the amount of waste and just follow the entire length of the jicama. And then you're basically left with the sections. Now, for the salad, what I like to do is, juliennes for most of the items, and simple tool rather than hand using the mandolin is to use actually a Japanese mandolin. The Japanese mandolin has a couple settings. You could actually have it just as a straight slicer, and it's easy to adjust. And then they have the julienne attachment, which just goes right in. And you want to actually be very, very careful with Japanese mandolin because of the way it's loose. I've actually sliced my hand many times because being in the restaurant industry, sometimes you get a bit careless, honestly, and you start going fast. So if you wanted to be safe, you could use a towel. And I'd usually set it down on a towel so that way it doesn't slide around as much. And then if you're, I always go with the shorter ends. That way, if you think about going through this end, by the end, when you go up here, it's actually very unstable to hold. So if you start with the easier ends, you can just go right across. And then just basically just keep rotating it until you're down to the last. Now, if you were worried about slicing your hand, you can take a towel and go right across. So that way you don't actually slice your hand. Oh, that's true. You might have a bit of sliced towel, but a towel never killed anyone. Plus, it'll save your fingers. Yeah. So, nice, simple juliennes. And this can also be eaten raw. If anyone's interested, I'll pass it around and you can actually taste it. Can I have a small plate? I'll pass around all the vegetables separately so that way you can taste it without the coleslaw dressing that I made. Yeah. It has a subtle natural sweetness, and you'll initially think of it as yeah, absolutely. Take a piece and taste. You'll think of it as almost like eating a pear with the crunch. But because it has no flavor, you'll think of it as more of a potato. And it can be stewed, but it's actually quite amazing just having it as a salsa as well, or as a slaw. The next item on the list, I think, is dosakay. I'll just go down the list of what we have on here. Well, okay. I have green cabbage and red cabbage. I'll just go through them quickly. The green cabbage, otherwise also called, if you go to an Asian market, Chinese cabbage, they're all part of the Brassica family, cabbage family. And the easiest way to prepare them is basically to split them in half. And then just go right down the center of the core. And then that's it. That's the only part of the cabbage that you really can't eat. I mean, technically, you can also go stew it and make do cabbage and cabbage and potatoes for the corned beef. So technically, it can be eaten, but in terms of rawness, it's not very pleasant to eat on its own. And then simple julienne is just Now, in terms of knife, what I'm doing is basically curling my fingers in, and then using my finger as basically almost like a slide to so when I'm going up and down, I'm actually just following the tips of my finger. Technically, at some point I might like pull my knuckles off, but that's another thing. So, no, not tonight. No mistakes. I'm sure everyone's tasted regular cabbage, so I'm not going to pass that around. But, oh, no, you haven't? No, you don't like it? The baby's going to love it, though. Okay, so what I have here is a chayote. It's another. It's from Mexico as well. Actually, it's harvested in the America area, which is actually between Costa Rica and Mexico. It's where like Ponce de Leon and no, not Ponce de Leon, but the other conquistadors basically went through Costa Rica and then navigated to basically take the shortcut from. They called it a shortcut back then, because it was easier than going to the south of South America and going around to get to the Pacific Ocean. But they actually traversed all the way through, and while they were traversing through, they picked up the chayote. Chayote has many different names, but the Mexican pronunciation is like they have an X on it. Chayote, it's almost like a Q sounding name. But chayote has basically the entire skin and meat, and the seeds are all completely edible, fully edible as well. The simplest thing, you can, in South America, they actually use this mostly for stews as well, but it's eaten raw. It has medicinal purposes as well. It aids in digestion as well. So everything that I'm showing you today essentially is aiding in digestion. So that means I hope no one goes home sick. Yeah. But same thing for this one. Basically just straight julienne. And then you'll notice how it almost looks like a Granny Smith apple. It's like a cross between a Granny Smith apple and a cabbage in terms of flavor. You'll get the same crunch, the same look. It'll have a subtle sweetness. And I'm going to pass this around so that way you guys can try the chayote by itself. And then I'll pass the fruit itself so that way you can smell it. Thank you. Now, the chayote also has a huge amount of vitamin C as well, so it acts as an antioxidant as well. The next item is actually not from the South Americas, but actually from India. This is actually from the family of cucumber, the sakai, which is actually from I think the Punjabi, the northern region of India. And it's basically similar to a muskmelon slash cucumber. The skin itself is not edible. I tried it. No one has really listed it as being edible, but I always try it just to, baby emergency. So I just take the ends off, cut the center. It'll have the exact same layout in terms of seeds like a regular muskmelon. Actually, I'll pass it around because you'll notice the smell as well. It smells very much like a cross between a cantaloupe and a cucumber. And the easiest way to prepare it is to first remove the center. And